have some other. We're going to have time to look at some other topics this morning, including the Ukraine war, of course. All right, so I'm going to just step aside now, and I invite others to take the floor with respect to the bone-crushing sanctions bill.
Okay. So thank you, Oliver, and yeah, thanks for your also your sense of humor. 300,000, maybe it's more like 300, right? Um, it's like 0.1% of the 1%. Um, and yeah, so this sanctions slash tariffs bill, I think it's proposing 500% tariffs on U.S. Russia trade and up to 100% tariffs on countries that trade with Russia. I think there is no question that it is targeted against India and China. Um, uh, Max Blumenthal, while talking about this bill, um, has said that yeah, they will protect their allies, which are European countries, and they will target the culprits who are India and China. So I think that framing should hopefully open the eyes of a lot of people here in India who may have some misgivings about the nature of U.S. Administration and also the kind of bipartisan support that this bill has got. I think it's like 86-12. The introductory phase was had a overwhelming support. Um, so it also shows the overwhelming neocon convergence between Congress and Trump administration. So to all those people, especially in India, who were thinking that after these 4 years, everything is going to be fantastic, wonderful between India and US, uh, that should serve as an eye opener. Though I have my questions about how optimistic we can be about any such realistic assessment. Uh, However, so I think there are major implications. There are other major implication is global oil prices. Global oil prices. What will happen to Trump has said that he wants to add Iran to the sanctions bill. Though he said later that if that's going to take time, that's kind of okay. We can go ahead with Russia, but he's suggested adding Iran to it. And now you take out, a couple of largest oil producing nations um, from um, from global supply. What does that do to oil prices, and what will it do to billions of people in global South? 1.5 billion here in India, and you have Africa, um, Southeast Asia, and of course China. Though even though the bill targets Russia and China, I think it can damage India more than Russia and China. I don't think Russian policy will change with this bill. Uh, they have neither will Chinese policy change. We have seen how China has handled tariffs in past 1.5 years. So in a way, Russia and China have been preparing for this moment. But yeah, but that can't be said of India. So Yeah, so with regards to oil prices, I mean these sanctions can have far-reaching consequences for India. India's Prime Minister a few months back had said in Netherlands that there is a risk that all the work that India has done over decades to bring its poor out of poverty, millions of them, could be undone. So now you have here neocon establishment showing no regard for what happens to the world and poor people therein. I think it would also have implications for midterms as progressives are challenging democratic establishment from inside. And the bill is really celebrating the legacy of Lindsey Graham, who's unfortunately been a warmonger. Um, so it is important to kind of remember that Biden administration had wanted India to buy Russian oil, apparently, when they first introduced these sanctions or price caps on Russian oil. Because they wanted some kind of price stabilization in in the world. So what happens to that? And and also, I think the underlying factor that is coming out of all these, the Venezuela and now with Iran, it does appear that United States wants to retain dollar hegemony, and it would like oil to be sold in dollars. It would like the trade to be continued in dollars, and we know that India's purchases of Russian oil have been in rupees, dirham, and yuan. So there is, moves by these countries, I think rather independently, to trade outside SWIFT and outside Western financial architecture outside of dollar. So that appears to be one of the issues. Though yesterday I heard something interesting from Alex Craner saying that in a lot of this what is considered illegal money laundering by Western banks like Standard Chartered and HSBC are involved, and there have been some exposes, some cases against them, and their involvement in routing money for Iranian oil, in funding ISIS during the wars, and narco trade in Latin America. And in both cases, the Congress and the US government and the UK government, more importantly, given that it is City of London, which is kind of at the center of these financial transactions, um, it's they have chosen to look the other way and bail out the establishment banks. Um, so coming back to the question of India and these sanctions or tariffs, uh, what uh, what I'm hearing here is that yeah, the news coverage has actually been fairly limited, extremely limited, given that there were some student agitations, and most of the media has been focusing on that issue, while this very important issue is in the background. We must yeah. So what I'm hearing, a former foreign secretary, has said that yeah, pretty much a few things that I have said, that bipartisan support exposes America as being anti-India, and also that in terms of what might happen next, there may be pressure on Indo-US trade deals. So a trade deal is being negotiated. Uh, I would say controversial trade deal where US is seeking to enter agricultural markets of India, uh, which support a very good part of India's population. I think 30 to 40% of India's population depends on agriculture, and their incomes are protected. And removing the tariffs or the protections could have consequences. So that's been a concern. So this there is a fear that this will empower Trump to bargain harder for agricultural access. And yesterday, we heard from the Commerce Minister, who's been leading these negotiations, that the first tranche of Indo-US trade deal is ready, and it will be signed as soon as there is some clarity and there is some guarantee that they won't impose additional tariffs on India. Right. So that appears to be the concern here, that this will empower Trump administration to further bully and coax India into signing a trade deal which might not be in its own interest. The other commentary, the hopeful commentary that I read in Hindustan Times was that there are a few more steps that need to be cleared, and in the meantime, there may be some scope for negotiation. We can, Oliver has also pointed out there could be discussions. India will start talking to them, and there could be further discussions on it. The eventual final tariff rate may be lower than 100%. Congress is in recess, so this might take until September till it fructifies. And there also appears to be, as per these reports in Indian media, some hesitation on part of some Democrats who think, and this is again very interesting for us, who think that sanctions are better than tariffs, because tariffs will end up empowering Trump administration to do arbitrary things. So Congress should retain the power of expanding these sanctions. So there is no doubt that they want these kind of measures that will cripple global South. And I think that is very unfortunate. So I think what is also interesting to note here is that the kind of coordination that we see within the neocon establishment, in the legislature, in the executive, and also across the Atlantic, uh, we do not see that kind of coordination in other countries. I think most prominent of the groupings is BRICS, but I think it's far from being cohesive. So in this regard, I think it is important. It does appear like each country is fighting its own battle, though there is a growing relation between Russia and China. Um, but yeah, it appears like every country is kind of on its own, trying to weigh its options, and yeah. So in this regards, I think there will be other opportunities for me to expand on this. But I think India hasn't been preparing for a post unipolar movement the way I think Russia and China have been preparing, I would say. I think you have a lot of trade lobbies that export to America, which are very influential, and India often works. India is wide open, as Oliver said, for anyone to explore. It doesn't move with the kind of unified, singular focus that we see in Russia or China. And I think in this regard, India is more a representative of global South, or politics of global South, and China is an exception. It's almost like a once in a thousand year exception. But I think India is more of a rule. There are competing lobbies. There are billionaires, and India's oil sector, Reliance has invested under Trump pressure in Texas, uh, and so the trading lobbies, the capitalist class, the diasporic lobbies, the export lobbies are deeply tied to Western capital. And the other problem I would like to kind of point, we have also seen a lot of hate against Indians, anti-immigrant hate in the last 2 years, which is also a very important topic. But since we have wars and people are dying, and we rarely get to talk about that. So we do see that kind of targeting of India, and these people are very important for India's economy. Remittances are very important. We must remember that there are 9 to 10 million people in Gulf, in these Arab monarchies, who are sending remittances back to India, which plays a very important role in India's economy. So the war is going to hurt India bad in that regard. We must also remember that with these H1B controversies and the moves to change immigration policy rather abruptly, also affecting those who have already been there and not just future oriented. And this is not talked about. And this is quite pathetic and very unfortunate that Indian government is not talking about these things with their counterparts in Europe and America. They used to do that until a few years ago. And after the pushback from anti-immigration policies of these countries, they are like, okay, it's your prerogative. So after these pressure tactics, we see that in the 90s we have seen some Indian IT companies come up, like TCS, Infosys, and these IT companies were essentially servicing American, larger American companies, and doing some outsourcing work, back end office management for those companies, and they did fairly well for themselves and for the economy of the country here. Um, um, so now, in the second phase of this AI-led development, we see that these companies are diminishing, and now we have they are called GCCs. That's Google, Meta, and all these foreign software computer companies that are directly investing in India, and they don't they have a tax holidays, and so they pay taxes in US but not in India. So we have this increasing Americanization of Indian economy, where unlike the Chinese who let foreign companies come in, but over a period of time they take the majority stake and kick the foreign partners out. There is no such thing going on here. Many money-making sectors are dominated by foreign powers largely aligned to US. So what has happened is that the state has receded. One example can be India's largest automobile company, Maruti, which was a state-run corporation, which was in partnership with Suzuki of Japan, and now Suzuki controls it almost entirely. So you have, Japanese and Koreans, who have a big share of automobile markets, and also in this regard, this is another issue that I would like to come back to um, later. But this kind of India being a counterweight to China, we hear a lot about India being a counterweight to China. uh, this is, I think this is a misgiving whose time has come. A misgiving that needs to stop. So India being a counterweight to China, we started seeing this. So India, I would argue, whenever I get a chance to write, I would argue that India made two historic blunders. One was a diluted NAM, non-aligned movement under US pressure in the 90s. And later in the late 90s, early 2000s, when Primakov proposed RIC, Russia, India, China as a counterweight to Western power, that is another time that India made a historic mistake by dismissing the idea and keeping it going for some time, but no real enthusiasm. And that was a good time. That was a good time because that was a time. I mean, the politics of India are I think there needs to be some understanding about it because we see the kind of anti-Russia in mood in the West. A lot of people are exposed to that, so they don't understand the kind of relationship India has had with Russia and a historic relationship. So while India has frequently been under sanctions, US and Western sanctions throughout Cold War and even after that, the other superpower back during the Cold War was a very close ally, and it was a defense alliance as well. It was called a friendship treaty, but there was a defense alliance. So that's the closest India has come to being in a defense alliance with any country. And we also understand that India has rather strong defense ties with Russia. So in the late 90s and early 2000s, the power differential between Russia and China was not as great as it is right now. Russia was certainly diminished, and China was rising. But it was so. So we also need to understand that India and China have a border issue, right? So a border issue that keeps them from, and also Pakistan is an important factor. Uh, so the border issue keeps them from keeps India particularly very suspicious. India is very suspicious of China. And very recently, I think just this week, after a round of talks between India and China, Chinese representative came up with a statement saying India respects China's sovereignty over over Tibet. And then the Indian readout said that while India respects China's sovereignty over Chinese regions, China doesn't respect India's sovereignty over Indian regions. So there you see, there is a problem there, and yeah, so in the 90s was a good time, and we must remember when there was a border clash between China and India in 2020. Actually, it was, yeah, leading up 2018, 2019, 2020. There was a freeze in the ties, and it was Russia that mediated the truce. And it was Russia that brought the two countries together to the discussion table and helped normalize it. So Russia's leverage is kind of going down, and that should really worry Indians. And 90s were a time where you could have moved faster in trying to settle these things. And another point of concern for India should be the strategic convergence between United States and China on South Asia. In South Asia, China and US often are on the same page. Historically, both have supported Pakistan, both have seen India as a destabilizer in the region. There is a new book that might interest you, and I will. There is a new book about balkanization of India, how the West has had a project of balkanization of India, and I think an important consideration that I think most mainstream academia misses. So even with the regime change operations that we have seen in Bangladesh, Nepal, we have seen that pro-India governments were replaced eventually by pro-China governments. So while the regime change operations were carried out by U.S. deep state actors, there is a convergence whereby and this kind of goes back to China's inclusion into the Security Council, goes back to Nixon Kissinger days, uh, Vietnam War, and then the Bangladesh War, most importantly, where you have China in the background, but basically Pakistan and US foregrounding, and a genocide was carried out, the Bangla genocide. And then you have India and the Soviet Union on the other side supporting Bangladesh's independence. So there are some nuances. There are some nuances to this. These players: U.S., China, Russia, India, which are often missed in mainstream attention and also in alternative media, which might just portray U.S. versus China as the next big fight. But I think U.S. has significant dependence as of now on China, and so there are some nuances, and the different regions appear to be operating differently. So it remains to be seen how India negotiates and how India manages these emerging challenges. I saw some clues to it in Oliver's Substack post yesterday. Uh, I we have to wait until we see more in the mainstream media, but perhaps Oliver uh, could share his thoughts and the others as well, and particularly with Christian, this kind of yeah uh, establishment, Democratic and Republican establishment, and the challenge that it is now facing from you know the progressives and others, young people, especially below 30, who are not very happy. So with that, I would stop.
All right. Well, thank you, Sumanth. You are far more knowledgeable on all of the intricacies and their interchange with history with India's economy, and it's always fascinating to view conflicts and issues through that lens because we so often lose sight of that in this. You had mentioned a couple of things that really stuck out to me, and one which was your sort of parting shot is how this is going to be impacted by tensions within the internal politics of the United States, and particularly with the uh, Democratic Party shifts, because we have our own hawks in the Democratic Party, uh, just as there is the neoconservative wing of the Republican Party that is very extreme in its warlike policies going into this. Uh, I would say it's really too early to tell with this because so much of it depends on what's going to happen in these midterm elections. Is that going to significantly change the balance of the House of Representatives and the Senate as we're moving forward? But one of the other things that you have mentioned, I think, is just from the beginning and at the end, is this issue of solidarity and the West's dependence on China at this point, particularly in the United States' dependence on China and how that influences foreign policy. Uh, you know, a lot of economies are going to be impacted by this bill. The Graham bill is not just impacting China and India. And you brought up the West or America's dependency on China's interconnectedness with the Chinese economy. That's one reason why I retain some skepticism on whether or not the United States is going to be truly aggressive in going after China and others. Because remember, it is the five largest trading partners with Russia that they're trying to go after on this. And sure, that's China, that's India, but it's also Japan, right? Are we really going to be aggressive going after Japan, which is a major stabilizing influence and ally in the region, or at least we view them that way right now. And certainly with the establishment of U.S. military bases coming all the way down, almost to hem in Chinese territorial expansion in the South China Sea area. And it's also several European countries in the European Union that are potentially going to be hammered by these 100% tariffs that they're threatening on this. And so is it saber rattling? Is there going to be something behind this? The United States right now and our economy is a the suffering that we're seeing among consumers and across almost the entire spectrum of the economy. Of course, um, I don't think that there's an appetite for expanding this conflict. I mean, the conflict is expanding, of course, but to expand the economic pain with, our trading partners in Japan and in Europe, in India, and in China, I mean, that is just going to hasten an inevitable, sort of collapse of our economy if this conflict rolls on. And so I think it's really important to kind of not to understand that there are going to be limits to what the United States can project. It's also important to understand that our projection of power, our ability to impose sanctions on other countries or to really harm other countries through our trading policies also depends on the willingness of our allies and our friends to back us up. And over the last 2 years now, we have seen, certainly a move towards isolating ourselves from those allies. The idea of America first and America only and going alone has, it's been cutting off our nose to spite our face, right? And now that we are going to need that kind of solidarity, we're going to need to stand united if we're going to apply maximum economic pressure, of course. It's at a very time when we're, facing blow after blow with the expanding energy crisis from the two wars, the one in the Gulf and the war in Ukraine. And I think it's really important to keep an eye on just how those are evolving because, we've got a Strait of Hormuz closure that we've been talking about for weeks, months, really. That's 14 million barrels a day that are off the market. That's 14% of the global oil supply. And even though we've got a Red Sea route and the Saudis and Emiratis we've seen the Houthis now closing down that as well. And so, instead of 20 ships moving through the Red Sea, if we're down to two, it's a significant impact on oil supplies. The Red Sea blockade expansion from the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and just basically the trapping of cargo in the that's bound for Europe is pushing oil prices way up. The liquid natural gas is becoming a real issue, especially severing Asian buyers from Qatar, which was their major liquefied natural gas supplier. At the same time, we're starting to see the impacts of the Ukrainian war. I know that we briefly talked last time we were together last week about the targeting of Iranian vessels and supplies by Ukraine that are moving in there. It's important to revisit what's happening with supplies. So I believe it was Oliver who brought up the fact that the Biden administration actually wanted to continue to allow India to buy Russian oil to keep prices stabilized and move things through the region. The drone and missile strikes that have been targeting two-thirds of Russia's regions with fuel supply shortages, that's had a major impact on just whether or not there are any supplies that are out there, especially in the occupied Crimea area. It's putting a big squeeze on diesel and jet fuel. It's making sure that those repercussions really are going to be felt globally. And they're going to be felt by India. They're going to be felt by China, as a matter of fact, as well, because China, right now, a lot of that natural gas that had previously been going to Europe before the conflict had been rerouted over to China. It insulated it. It provided a buffer so that China wasn't feeling the pain. If we start now imposing tariffs at a time when China's, increasingly drawing and, that buffer from Russia, I don't think China's going to sit back and not retaliate in ways that are going to exacerbate the issue. Right now, the pipeline that goes through Siberia under the Power Siberia pipeline is a massive lifeline for that buffer for China in this moment. And so, as much as the hawks have always hammered on that drumbeat for war in the United States, the neocons, I don't know that the Western alliances, or particularly the United States at this point, because we seem to be going it alone without our alliance partners in this conflict, is really ready to absorb the further economic impact that, the exacerbating a trade war over this and trying to punish those who are taking Russian oil would actually bring to the United States economy in this way. I think we should remain, skeptical at the same time. Never underestimate what this regime is willing to do. The Trump administration hasn't demonstrated its capacity to act first and think of the consequences later. And anytime they're empowered by those who can help pass those bills or provide shelter or cover for the administration in enacting bad ideas, anytime they get that chance, they will act. But with the pressure that's coming from the electorate in a midterm election year, which is often not the most powerful time to pressure the White House into policy change, I really don't see any rational outcome for pushing through such a sweeping sanctions bill, and certainly for fully implementing such a bill in this case. I think we're going to want to sit back and wait and see. Obviously, the bill, it's likely to pass because it has bipartisan support. The bill itself is currently just sort of sitting, waiting for the August recess to be finished. It's one of those, we've got a deadlock right now in the House of Representatives. It's likely not to be looked at in the lower chamber at least until September here. And it's also going to be caught up in internal debates about checks in the presidential power, because in this bill, the White House is asking for amendments that grant the president direct authority over tariffs as part of this bill. And that's something that's likely to get a lot of House Democratic resistance. In the meantime, unilateral tariff powers by the executive branch, they've already been struck down in large part by the courts. I just think that this is going to have a long journey to get through and become codified into law. And even if it does, I am hoping at least that there's going to be a lot of second thoughts on other ways to resolve this energy crisis and to resolve this conflict without imposing this kind of massive economic harm, not just to the United States, but to, globally to the economy as well. And those are sort of my thoughts on that, just coming from a perspective of somebody who's going door to door and talking to people who are, regardless of their political persuasion, um, you know, finding themselves completely at odds with the United States' decision to go into these conflicts, the United States' decision to enter in a tariff war, a trade war, and the States administration's decision to impose sanctions on our trading partners around the world. We're also seeing a lot of resistance among, representatives who are all up and down the ticket, having to run for re-election in this climate, and they're feeling the blows as well. They're feeling the pressure from their constituents, and this is just a very bad time to try to push through policies like this. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so thank you, Christian, for bringing some realism to the discussion. I think this is also why I think there isn't, a kind of panic in India's mainstream media. And I think they do think things can be managed because, having such high sanctions on China will obviously increase prices domestically for US. And yeah, however, as I have said, this could be used as a pressure tactic to force the Indo-US trade deal. Because while the discretion, the discretionary aspect is quite threatening, and I think that as you have said, and as reports here indicate, House Democrats might problematize it. So I think, yeah, we have to see how it evolves. And yeah, so the 5 countries targeted are India, China, Slovakia, Hungary, and Azerbaijan. And yeah, Max Blumenthal in his opening remarks did say that the allies will be shielded. And it appears that Japan has shifted in a big way to Canadian oil. And that's what I just read before joining the Zoom call. So, yeah, so I think it's an evolving situation. So, yeah, this is certainly an issue that I think we are all going to be watching. Yeah.
A cue, I think, for Ben to tell us his perspective on this.
I'll just keep my comments brief. I mean, I would love to have a fuller discussion about what has been happening in India aside from some of these most recent events. And I think I would say that I don't really understand the overall strategy that the Trump administration is trying to push here. They seem to be having a real hard time with their getting bogged down in West Asia. I don't see how they think they're going to project power in the way that they are attempting to do through military warfare as well as economic warfare. This is, to me, I would agree with Christian. It looks very likely to be something that will seem like a big escalation at first, and then Trump or Congress for procedural reasons or for immediate kind of we're about to enter a crisis sort of reasons will be forced to pull back in the way that they've done many times before. I I do again though just wonder what are some of the if any. I mean, I thought it was really interesting. Sumanth mentioned the non-aligned movement. What, if any, kinds of alternative arrangements are these countries really working together on? I mean, they're going to have to keep dealing with the Americans in this way. Uh, it seems very pertinent to them, more urgent than ever, to have some sort of cooperation between themselves so that they don't really need to worry so much about uh, the Americans making silly moves like this. I think I'll leave that there. Um, we are coming up on an hour uh, pretty soon here. Um,
Yeah,
we can start, we
thanks.
can start multiple recordings if we'd like.
Thanks for the reminder, Ben. But before we close, I would like to inject a few of my own comments with respect to these issues that we specifically focused on over the past hour.
Yes.
Apparently, but I think
I lost track of time too. I was enthralled with Sumanth's, coverage of this.
I like Ben's skepticism. How does the United States expect to project power in West Asia? I do not see the United States projecting power in West Asia because, first off, twice this country, my country, has gone to war with a sovereign nation, Iran, totally unprovoked. The first time, even there were supposedly negotiations ongoing between Iran and the United States. And the United States was actually backing an incredibly aggressive, I don't have the right language for it even, but the decapitation strike on Iranian leadership, I still find just totally shocking, even to think about. This is not a projection of power. No. This is a projection of desperate, unhinged madness. And then it does the same thing again, only a few months later. Even though by this time, surely all this 18, 19, however many intelligence agents we're supposed to have in this country, apparently none of those intelligence agencies are strong enough to tell Trump, look, what Mossad is telling you is total BS. They don't know enough, or they don't have enough confidence, or they don't have enough loyalty to the American people to make sure that Trump understands that he is going to lose. Why is he going to lose? Because the United States stockpiles of weapons are badly depleted because of all the weapons. And in a way, I have to say, well, actually, Trump was right in a way to blame Biden. It was Biden who sent all those weapons to Ukraine, and then Trump comes up with the intriguing, but also at the same time awful alternative, which is to force the Europeans, who are desperate to keep the United States in the European arena, to force them to pay for the weapons, but to buy them from the US arms. I mean, in a way, you have to kind of laugh at the cunning of it all, but also be despair over the basic stupidity of it all, because we don't have the weapons, and Iran has far more weapons than anyone admitted. And well, Exeth was telling us just a couple of months ago about how the Iranian military forces have been pretty much annihilated. We've seen just how unhinged that judgment has been. And every day more, we see evidence of greater, but I won't say greater accuracy, because maybe I don't totally I don't have sufficient information about the most recent attack on Jordan. The Americans say that nothing was hit. I think actually something was hit, but that's just my word against the U.S. administration. Who are you going to believe? But overall, what I'm seeing is greater the weapons that Iran is firing primarily against U.S. assets in the Gulf and some other infrastructure of the Gulf states. They are saving the best for last. They started off using their old weapons, their old missiles, and over time we're seeing more and more powerful, more and more modern weapons. And do we think that ultimately those are just going to come to an end and Iran is just going to fold over because maybe Iran is taking some crazy risk that just maybe that the global energy crisis will become so shocking that the United States is going to have to pack up and go home before Iran gets to the point of exhausting its own weapon supply. It may be, I mean, maybe that is it, but I also think that that would be a dangerous presumption to make that could be a possible end scenario. Russia and China, I think, are there. I mean, of course, they have to say that they're not because that's what everyone, whenever countries in this particular situation are asked, are you helping such and such? No, 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 not doing that, no, no. We don't believe that because you know that Russia and China can see and have now seen for several years that the neocon movement in the United States and all of its captive leaderships in other parts of the political West are totally committed without any, as many people use the expression, they don't have any reverse gear.
No.
All they know is how to double down, double down, double down, because they think that works. But as you said last week, Christian, if you're in a hole,
yeah,
you're in a hole, stop digging to make it worse. You know, and but what I've noticed in the last few days, a number of articles, quite good articles, but they're basically saying what I've been saying for a very long time. So I'm kind of surprised that people see anything new here, namely that these wars, these conflicts are all interrelated. Of course, they're all interrelated. It's becoming more and more. I mean, there were a few weeks after Trump first came into his second administration, when one might have had some thoughts that yes, maybe he actually really is against war and he is against forever war, and he will be the hero, the Superman who will pull the United States away from this trap of neocon thinking.
Oh, that's why he got the FIFA Peace Prize.
But it turns out that he totally surrounded himself with neocons, and when you look at what he does, he does everything he can to fulfill the neocon agenda. What is that agenda? The agenda is a restoration of a unipolar world dominated by the United States, and that's what brings all of these conflicts together. Iran is taken down because it's too powerful anyway in West Asia. It is a threat to the regional power of the United States proxy in West Asia, namely Israel. And it also is a supplier of significant oil to China, which is the ultimate enemy of the United States. And the conflict in Russia is intended to prevent an alliance. It's a total failure. Of course, this policy, like all of these policies, are total failures. The total failure of a policy to drive a wedge between Russia and China, using Ukraine as proxy. How do we know that? Well, we know because people in power keep telling us what they're going to do. You know, like the RAND report of 2019 explained all the things that have actually happened. I saw an article the other day with all you look at all the things that have been going on in terms of how the United States and Europe have struggled to bring Russia down using Ukraine as a proxy. All of these things are prefigured in the 2019 RAND report, which is called Extending Russia. And then the Europeans are equally daft. If one is looking for a winner in the stupidity stakes, it actually has to be Europe, not the Trump administration. Because Europe keeps telling, well, we're going to think, we're going to go to war. Is it 2029? Maybe we'll be ready by 2000. Well, it might be 2030, but we're definitely going to war with Russia. That's just crazy talk. And unfortunately, they I think they truly believe it, and they seem to believe the reasons that they've told themselves as to why they want to do this crazy thing, which is namely that Russia is about to attack us. When has Russia attacked Western Europe in the past? What date? How many years should I give it? 200 or something of that kind. I remember there was a point that in the Napoleonic, after the Napoleonic collapse, that Russian troops arrived in Paris. I hope they had a very good time, because it's probably the last time that Russian troops are going to make it, because they don't want Paris. They got as much territory and mineral wealth and everything else as they could possibly want in the territory of Russia itself, which is the largest single national territory on the globe. Russia doesn't need territory. Russia needs security. That's what Russia needs. And that is what Europe and the United States, through NATO, refuse to give it. Russia has offered to be part of the European security structure, and has been rebuffed by NATO countless times. And everything that the United States and Europe do together on this issue is designed to cut Russia out, to paint Russia as the other, as the people you cannot ever talk to, because they're so bad, they're so evil, their motives are just beyond the pale. It's a crazy nightmare story, a horror movie script that Europe has fabricated, using on the basis of one propaganda campaign after another propaganda campaign over hundreds of years, going back way before even the Crimean War. And the British have always been at the foreground of this propaganda game against Russia, and they still continue, I think, to be the most potent force in this anti-Russian, the continuation of the anti-Russian propaganda campaign. And it's just a silly fairy story. But you know what Goebbels said, if the lie is big enough and you just keep repeating it over and over again, people believe it, unless, of course, there are strong alternative voices to be heard. But we don't have that in Europe, do we? We don't have that in the United States. There are no alternative narratives in the mainstream. And that is a very successful propaganda campaign, but it's propaganda. It's just make-believe. It's fairy stories. And they are fairy stories that are driving this planet in very, very dangerous directions. And if I can just a couple of thoughts, perhaps not as coherent as they should be, but if I go back to my starting point basically is, and maybe each of us here has a basic kind of existential starting point. So I'm going to share mine with you and with our viewers and listeners. And I think you, in turn, from time to time, I think you're going to talk to your existential starting point. And my existential starting point is that the trajectory of U.S. power, American power in the world, there have been times when there have been a lot of good things to say about this, but not recently. Not, to be frank, since the ending of the Soviet Union. An event, by the way, which was not the result of U.S. military or U.S. cultural or U.S. economic power. It was the result of things that were going on inside the Soviet Union at that time. But America took upon itself to declare itself, in effect, the winner of a war, the Cold War, and then since then has, for a period of time after that, strutted the world as the world's only superpower until when it became clear by 2001, when China was given membership of the World Trade Organization. What's happened to that? And then the neocons in the United States realized that the expansion of China had now taken on such a pace that China had become the enemy that had to be taken down. And over the past 20 years, we've seen more and more commitment and more aggressive assertion by central powers in the United States in favor of a resumption of American unipolarity. But unfortunately, without a hope in hell of achieving that. This is actually our main problem. The United States is wedded to an illusion, to something it simply cannot achieve. And this issue of Russian oil, I suppose, is a minor example of this, where Russia, now with Lindsey Graham's sanctions bill, is just another one of these sort of fairy tale nails that the United States is trying to hammer into a fairy tale piece of wood, namely that if only we just bring Russia down, we can stop Russia from earning money from the sale of its energy products. And so let's really go after that. And also, let's really make it very, very difficult for countries who want to buy Russian oil. And they're going to be sanctioned as well. If they are making products that are based on refined Russian oil, well, we're going to sanction them as well. We're going to do this. And so the extraordinary silliness, but also the danger of this, of course, is that these measures, which follow on from similar kind of Europe just a couple of weeks ago, European Union passed its 21st sanctions package against Russia. The mere fact that Europe has had to pass 21 sanctions packages against Russia sort of tells you that none of these ever actually work. That's why you need another one. And why don't they work? Well, because Russia sells oil to a lot of people who are not in the European Union. In fact, Russia can survive very well without the European Union. And then, of course, Russia is a major supplier to China. You talked about Power of Siberia 2 a moment ago, Christian. That's going to be a game changer, I think. Once that, I think work has already started on it.
Right.
And it'll probably be flowing. Oil will be flowing there within the next year or so.
Well, on Power Siberia 1, it's already flowing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then, but I worry. Here's the deal. Since for the last year or so, I, with many others, have looked with great hope to the BRICS. I have subscribed to the idea and trying to interpret the world. I've subscribed to the idea that what we are seeing, what we are witnessing, is a major historical epoch important transition from unipolarity to multipolarity, a world in which we have several major centers of power, but centers of power not sort of coexisting in a kind of 19th century balance of power way, but existing on the basis of a commitment, or shall we say a recommitment, bearing in mind the foundation of the United Nations, a recommitment to the idea of a world that is made up of sovereign nations, a world in which these sovereign nations should not fear being constantly harassed by greater powers, their elections constantly manipulated, their arenas of sovereign domain being constantly interfered with by greater powers. That is the kind of world that I think would be a better world. There's never going to be a perfect world, but I think that would be a much better world. So I look to the BRICS as the vanguard of that transition. And then from time to time, I really have to kind of look at who are the guys who are part of this? Well, they are China, and China, the asymmetry of Chinese power versus the power of the other members of that is sort of worrying. Yep. But up until now, China has been making very reassuring noises. But of course it wouldn't it? So we have to kind of deal with that. And then we look at Russia, which hasn't anything like the population power or market power of China. But what it does have is extraordinary nuclear power. In fact, I consider that Russia now, nuclear and weaponry power, which I believe is now significantly in advance of the power that is available to the United States. And then I look at a number of the other major players. Of course, India is so important here. I trust China, and China's on this oil issue has simply told its oil refiners, forget about Washington, guys. Stop taking Washington seriously. We're behind you. We will back you. Don't worry about the secondary sanctions. And I think that is actually a fair reflection of how things really are with China. China is so independent, is so powerful that it will no longer be suborned by Washington. And besides which, amongst the many other levers that China has as its disposal is that it is a primary source of rare earths, which are very important right now for advanced computing and advanced weaponry. Yes, maybe ultimately the United States might, but also very well might not come up with technologies that can substitute for rare earth. But that is going to take at least a decade.
Right.
So China has a very significant level. India, like so many of the other members of the BRICS, and as Samantha's very eloquently helped us to understand, is really, it's not so much balancing, it's caught between very contradictory pressures. And I think the one thing I picked up particularly from what Samantha was saying earlier, listening to the fact that the most important companies in every sector of the Indian economy are companies that have significant ties to the West, and therefore have very strong reason to be very fearful of secondary sanctions. Far more. China's on top of it. China's on top of all of the foreign investors or all the foreign companies that are present on it. India is not, because India has fallen, unfortunately, into the neocon trap of ultra-liberalism, ultra-capitalism. And so I worry about it. But then I also think, China is it needs. I mean, this issue of oil, by the way, gets very, very complicated, as I've recently discovered. There are so many different kinds of oil. There are so many different kinds of ways of refining oil. It gets very complicated, guys. So I hesitate but it seems to me China has got alternatives. It has alternative sources of energy. Only they're very dirty sources, in my view, like coal. But in the short term, China can take it or leave it. I mean, China's got enormous reserves, and if push comes to the shove, it'll find other ways. India, I'm not so sure. I mean, India is dependent for 85% of its energy. It is dependent on imports. So where is India going to go to get its oil right now? Up until now, it's been a heavy consumer of Russian oil. Trump told us about a year ago that because of the tariffs, 500% was it, or was it 50%? These numbers no longer seem to mean anything. You just come up with anything, anything that sounds a lot. 50% is a lot. Trump was going to impose a 50% tariff on everything, all Indian exports to the United States, including, and then he was going to. He told India, well, if you want to negotiate with the United States on tariffs, you got to stop buying all of this Russian oil. And then he told, about a couple of days later, he came and told the Americans, India is no longer importing any Russian oil. I'm great, aren't I great? And then, but then bit by bit, we began to, the evidence began to shift in the other direction and saying, well, yeah, they may have cut back a bit, but it's still consuming an awful lot of Russian oil. And I believe it is still doing. Now, in order to escape the new tariffs, the secondary tariffs that the United States is threatening India, is India going to say, okay, well, this time we really, really are going to stop importing Russian oil? Well, cross our hearts and hope to die. Where is India going to get its oil from? Well, it's not going to get it from Iran, apparently, not for a while. Well, is it going to pay the United States for LNG? Well, the United States doesn't have that much LNG. I mean, Europe is already hopelessly dependent on LNG. By the way, Europe is paying 5 times more for its energy than it used to when it just took it cheaply through the by pipeline, and of course it will be the same. In India, will just have to pay so much for it. It will not be an economic proposition. India has to find workarounds. It has no other choice. There is no other practical choice, and that I think that realization when the Trump administration finally realizes that no one of importance takes the United States seriously anymore. Not Russia, not China, not India. Okay, so the United States has all these chumps in Southeast Asia, Japan, the Philippines, South Korea. They always thought it was such a Thailand, Burma, Myanmar. They also thought it was such a good idea to fawn up to the United States in the effort to contain China. Are these guys really got to keep playing this pathetic, dependent game for U.S. favor when it realizes the U.S. can't protect it from anything? Having the U.S. as your major trading partner, as opposed to China, is going to destroy your economy, not strengthen it. It'll make you even more vulnerable if the day ever came for an expansion of Chinese power throughout Southeast Asia beyond what we currently see. But that's a long way off. And of course, the storm clouds, you never know where the lightning is going to come from. You never know what is going to hit. And maybe you don't want to use an umbrella because it might hit the top of your umbrella. So you find somewhere safe to hide away in, and just read the weather report and act accordingly. And I think if you read the weather report right now and act accordingly, it will be in favor of a major reduction in the power of the United States on the world stage. And there are elements in the Trump administration who would actually quite like that because they think that they're so powerful that it doesn't really matter what's going on anyway in the rest of the world. They've still got sources of wealth that they haven't yet taken. That is to say, my wealth and your wealth. They still know that our wealth may not seem a lot to us individually, but it's quite a bit when you heap it all together. They know that they can get their hand, they think they can get their hands on our wealth. And that's what we've really got to watch out for. Because if we want to be effective in the changing of the global order, we have to do something about this order in the United States, this national order, which is turning into something. I don't know what word you would prefer to use to describe this order. I don't think democracy has got very much to do with it. You know, like, for example, both the House and the Senate in the last few weeks, didn't they both vote in the war powers resolutions to vote to stop, to control Trump going to war over Iran? Well, if both houses of your legislative mechanism vote for something, but that somehow that doesn't matter. Apparently, that doesn't count.
Yeah. Do you have a democracy? Right. Well, I think it's important that we look at this shifting worldview, right? And this world order. I mean, Sumant began this discussion asking, why hasn't India embraced a more, hedging its bets, a different set of alliances, strengthening itself? I mean, starting off talking about NANP and the non-aligned movement and how, it was Nehru's speech, right, that gave rise to the non-aligned movement that, in the storms of the Cold War geopolitics, if the non-aligned movements of the world don't band together, they're going to sink in that storm between the two great powers. And we're also seeing, the history of the United States coming out, especially from World War II, as this great power that had largely developed a foreign policy that, while we can argue about its morality over the years, we could argue about its inevitability. At least it was consistent in the fact that the foreign policy of the United States was there to grow American empire, and it was there to create as much as possible a unipolar world to put the United States on top. And of course, there were always those who, I mean, as there always have been, those who profited greatly from, this exercise, this advancement, this expansion of empire. But at least there was a coherent, thought process that was driving decisions. And I think we need to brace ourselves for the realization that maybe that's not what's driving the United States policy right now, is that coherent vision. It's certainly driving it for China, and it's driving it for, every other country around the world. Hopefully India will get on board soon and start realizing that they need to start making their own decisions as well. But, just the fact that, we're seeing trade between China and Canada for their oil is showing that Canada's hedging its bets and finding more reliable trade partners than the United States. It's what we're seeing instead of a coherent policy is we're seeing the people who profited driving our policy, not just profiting from our policy. So just a day or two ago, Admiral Brad Cooper made an announcement. He went on record saying, we really need to just stop bombing Iran right now because we've run out of targets. There is no more effectiveness. We've hit everything we can hit, and it's no longer of an effect. I mean, one person would call that rational when I said, when you find yourself in a hole, quit digging. And yet, a different, much more cynical rationalism is at play here. Because every interceptor missile, right, is going to cost us almost $4 million every time we fire an interceptor missile. $3.5 million for every cruise missile. And if you looked at the map around Washington, D.C., mansion after mansion that's around there, it's all weapons manufacturers, right? It's Boeing, it's Raytheon, it's all across the board. And it doesn't matter if they're targeting something that's going to lead to effective military action. They don't care if they're targeting something that's going to, you know, bounce the rubble. For them, either way, every time one of those missiles is fired, that's millions of dollars of profit that's going into here. So we wonder, why are we continuing this despite the obvious economic pain? Why are we continuing this despite the fact that it is undermining our alliances and degrading the United States' ability to effectively project its power through diplomacy on the world stage? Why are we continuing this when we are depleting our own stockpiles and leaving ourselves vulnerable if another front opens up? Well, because every time we do this, every time we fire a missile, somebody's cashing in. And if we just take the most cynical route, the simplest, most cynical answer, what we see is the United States that's completely lost, policy-wise, as a country, run by an administration, it's completely lost the plot of American empire. That is simply seeing American empire as a chance to cash in now, regardless of the consequences later. But what we're seeing from the rest of the world is a very, necessary strategic hedging of bets from our allies in the Gulf region, who have realized that the American missile defense system is not defending them, that American bases in their countries is not making them safer, it's actually making them targets, to countries around the world that realize that the United States actions and its sanctions and its trade, war with the tariffs and its, and its blockages of the critical routes for fertilizer and for oil around the world is putting their economies at risk. And what they're doing is moving away from this. And so we very much are seeing a potential for the decline moment of American empire if somebody in the United States doesn't intervene, right? Internally, it has to be internal, right? Because the rest of the world is going to move on without us. It's going to find more reliable partners. It's going to find ways of doing business that increasingly become more effective at evading the kind of pressure we're doing. And without allies, without solidarity, we're going to find ourselves increasingly isolated. And with solidarity, with a new, whatever the new inheritor of the idea of a non-aligned movement, or the new BRIC alliance, right, that comes along, we're going to see a reshaping of the world order. And I believe that's what we're witnessing right now at this moment. And it wasn't necessary. It certainly wasn't inevitable in this time frame, but it certainly seems like we're in the middle of it right now. And oftentimes we can I always like to say, you can blame conspiracies, but more times than often, it's just incompetency behind the issue. And that's perhaps where we found ourselves right now.
Yeah. Let me briefly interject. We are past our time, but yeah. So last month, India bought 50% of its oil from Russia, and we are seeing that it's becoming increasingly difficult for its Gulf partners to supply oil with the So where do you go? Right, as Oliver said, where do you go? You import 85 to 90% of your oil from abroad. There are only so many places you can go to. And remember, Iran was one of the largest oil suppliers to India before 2018. So now, I think one of the positives is that the Ministry of Petroleum over here has made a statement that sanctions or no sanctions, tariffs or no tariffs, India will continue to buy Russian oil. So I think what that points to is that if the lure of economic growth or the mirage of economic enrichment at least of certain segments of the population, uh, pushed or pulled India closer and closer into the US led neoliberal architecture. Economic necessity now is also pushing it um, away from it, though not totally, because in the last few weeks we have also seen that India has entered into a lot of these rare earth groupings, networks along with US. So, well, that is where things are. But yes, there can. Um, yeah, there is some kind of problematization, at least in alternative media spaces, about reevaluation of India's relationship with the West. Another point that is brought about is India's defense relationship with Russia. Buying Russian weaponry triggers CATSA sanctions. Now that is contrasted with Pakistan's dependence on Chinese weaponry. About 85% of Pakistan's weaponry is now coming from China,
Yes.
but there are no sanctions on that. So we have to see how far some kind of collective realization and coherent strategy is eventually adopted by India. But at the moment, it does appear that there are different interest groups, there are pulls and pushes and pressures and balances. But there is definitely an investment in finding alternatives to SWIFT and something about de-dollarization. Though officially they say we are not part of any de-dollarization. But last quarter, 7% of India's total foreign trade was settled in rupees. And this is higher than 2.5% before that. So if that is a sustained direction, there is some reduction in its dependence on the dollar as well. So it remains to be seen. And there's a BRICS conference coming up in September. I think it's 12th and 13th. It appears that Xi Jinping of China will not be coming. But I think most of the discussions will be, I think the most important discussions will be around what kind of financial architectures are these countries planning. Though there is a talk in India that India runs huge deficits with BRICS as well. So that's another issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. May I suggest, gentlemen, that we have overrun our time quite a while ago, that Ben reminded us that we got to the maybe can we perhaps wrap this up by each of us trying to make a very, very pithy final thought that you'd like to share, and then we will bring this session to a close. Maybe beginning with Samantha. Do you have any final?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, the final thought would be understanding, interpreting the limits of American power. I think Western power and unipolarity. I think that is a topic that will stay with us.
Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna call this episode "When You're in a Hole, Stop Digging," and I think that's a good way of putting it. Unfortunately, it looks like America's not going to stop digging. So for God's sake, somebody needs to start building a ladder out of this thing. 'Cause it's not going to be them, and you should stop digging with them.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Christian.
Well, I think what we're touching on is every time you see one of these pivotal moments in history and a pivotal moment of geopolitics, yeah, it certainly is showing the limits of American unipolarity. It's showing it's calling a bluff, calling the bluff of America first and America going alone. But it also provides us an opportunity for reimagining what a coalition government can look like, what foreign policy can look like when we cooperate among nations, and why it's so important to move back from this, this very active, kinetic attempt to dominate other countries, violate sovereignty, back into the realm of diplomatic sustainability and cooperation. And I'm just hoping that, this has been enough of a lesson that we're ready to try that over again. Give it another shot.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Christian. Thank you very much, everybody. My own parting shot, I think, would be just so that our viewers might be interested to know, and if they would like to reach out to us and let us know what they think. Up until now, in the relatively small number of shows that we have so far done, we have largely concentrated on these broad geopolitical issues. And I think that's where we still want to go. But we also have to be aware of the extraordinarily important events that are going on here within the United States. And many of these, and there was an example we had just yesterday, and I will definitely not go down this particular rabbit hole now, but I just say the name. We had this appearance on the Hill of Fauci, the health czar through the horrible COVID years. And this, like so many other things that appear to be domestic stories when you first come across them, they turn out to be international and global stories. And it's whether here's where we might benefit. I'm sure we would benefit from feedback from our audiences, whether should we try religiously to contain our conversations to these apparently big geopolitical and most dramatic geopolitical events that have to do with war and violence, to the exclusion of domestic events within the United States, or should we do our very best to at least encompass the interrelationships between these two broad domains? That might help us to navigate this show further forward. So thank you so much, everybody. And I'm going to shut off the recording now and wish our viewers to be safe and secure and as happy as they possibly can, even despite these dire issues that we've been talking about. Thank you to all of our contributors, and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you so much.
Okay.